Well, historically, sequels often have a hard time topping the original. That's usually the case in cinema. It's often the case in sports as well. But the UFC is hoping to buck that trend on Saturday night as they run the world's most famous arena for the second time. Of course, it was a little under a year ago that they were at Madison Square Garden for the first time, and it ended up being one of the most historic nights in the sport's history. Also, one of the most historic nights in this building's history, and that's saying a lot. They broke the gate record, and of course, Conor McGregor became the first man to hold two belts at the same time in Ultimate Fighting Championship history. Now, on Saturday night, we welcome back George St Pierre, one of the greatest of all time. For the first time in 4 years, he's trying to become just the fourth fighter in UFC history to be a champion in two different weight classes. He fights Michael Bisping in the main event of UFC 217 for the UFC Middleweight Championship. We're going to talk about all that and more. We're standing right outside the Mecca, a little less than 24 hours away now from one of the most anticipated cards of 2017. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. That is Marc Raimondi. New York's own Marc Raimondi, by the way. Back at it again. Second time. We're running it. Compare it, Marc. Here we are 24 hours away. Remember, we did the preview show the night before 205 with the crazy Irish fans. It's a bit of a different feel this time. All these people are here to watch the Knicks about to beat the Phoenix Suns. How would you compare the buzz in the city, your hometown? Yes, see, there you go. Yes, that's right, my friend.
Yeah, you already know.
We're just taping something.
Yo,
do you mind just giving?
All right. Shout out to everybody out
that's
there.
right.
You already know.
There you go. So maybe this is a sign of things to come, a sign of the buzz building in the city. How would you compare it to last year?
Was he part of a marketing campaign?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Last year we had 20,000 crazy Irishmen. Now we get one New Yorker.
It's not the same, obviously. I mean, we're not going to lie and say that it is, and that's okay. This is a big event in its own right. It's hard to compare what happened last year because, like you said, it was such an historic event. I mean, it broke the gate record at Madison Square Garden. That is no small feat. McGregor is obviously, he kind of casts a shadow over the rest of the sport at this point. So nothing quite is as big as him right now. But yeah, this is a great event. The buzz is not crazy in New York, but I think by tomorrow night, people will be excited, and it's going to be a great card.
Well, we just wrapped up these ceremonial weigh-ins, and I got to say, just sitting there watching, especially the top three fights, the trio of title fights at the top, I'm just kind of in awe of it. Like, it doesn't get much better than this as far as MMA is concerned. This is UFC 100S, 200S. These three fights, there's something for everyone. You want the return of a legend? You got it in the main event. You want a rivalry unlike any other? I mean, teammate versus ex-teammate in the co-main event? You get that. Joanna and Rose, it's like it's hard to really top this, and maybe we've gone spoiled. Maybe we're comparing it too much to 205. But I am hard-pressed to find three better title fights. And often I know the UFC doesn't do three title fights, but three better fights in UFC history, really. I mean, this is really something for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I've vacillated between the three fights, among the three fights, about which I'm most excited about. I've gone from Joanna to Rose to Cody versus TJ to Bisping versus GSP. What GSP is going to show up after 4 years, moving up a weight class. And after today, I was actually most excited again about Young Jacek versus Namajunas. So I've kind of gone through all three.
Okay, why?
Joanna has actually been the biggest star as far as the fans go in person all week. I think she got the biggest pop at open workouts. She got the biggest pop at the press conference yesterday. I'm not sure if she had the biggest pop today at weigh-ins. Obviously, GSP and Bisping had a large fan contingents there for them, but all week she's been very charismatic. She knows how to work the crowd. She's talked a lot of trash. The face-offs with her and Rose have been some of the best face-offs in any fight, women, men, whatever, that I've seen. They've been so intense, and the dynamic between the two of them is really unique, where Rose is just ice cold, steely, and Joanna is like saying some really terrible things like right up in her face and actually like hit her nose yesterday. Kind of gave her a boot with her fist. I'm really pumped for that fight. I think that Joanna has taken her game to the next level. She's a different level of confidence than she used to be. She's incredibly charismatic. I'm psyched for that fight.
I'm happy you highlighted the face-offs because my favorite part of today was just watching Rose as Joanna was getting up there. She knew what was coming, and she was almost meditating. And then, I don't know if it was creepy. I don't know what it was. It was almost like she was possessed, and I loved every minute of it. I'm not knocking it. She was like just sort of mumbling something to her. She said it was the Lord's Prayer. That's what she said to Joe Rogan. But that dynamic, as you just pointed out, between Joanna's intensity and Rose's calmness, like just how stoic she is, she's unflappable in the face of what Joanna is trying to do. And I'm wondering if you feel like this is shades of Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm? Like, is Joanna trying too hard to get under her skin, and because Rose is not reacting to it, do you feel like she's just kind of getting outside of her game, like this is getting to be too much, or is this typical Joanna?
I don't think it's at all like the Rousey Holm thing, because you had Edmund Tarverdian on your show recently, and he said something that was very illuminating to me. He insinuated that Rousey was almost trying to pump herself up for that fight against Holm.
You don't sense that with Joanna?
I don't think so, because that's what Joanna usually does. That's her MO. She always does that, and she's been doing that in every stare down that they've had. Whereas Rousey and Holm was very respectful up until that, where Rousey just kind of went crazy. So I think it's very different. I think that this is Joanna's game. She sees weaknesses or at least perceived weaknesses in her opponents, and that's what she's trying to do here. I think she's trying to exploit that weakness. She's trying to promote the fight, and I think she's trying to get in Rose's head. I really do.
She even mentioned after the face-off that Pat Barry, who's Rose's fiance, called her the B word, and she felt like that was crossing the line, which is interesting because she said that Rose is mentally unstable. I don't know. I felt like she's been trying a little too hard, but maybe she just feels like she has to do that to get under Rose's skin. It's certainly not the first time that Joanna has tried to play mental, warfare with her opponent, but this seems maybe just a dial, like notched up, just a dial up. Like, I don't know. I felt like it's been different. How would you rate Rose as far as what she brings to the table compared to Joanna? Joanna has fought, obviously, a who's who at 115. If she successfully defends the title on Saturday night, she ties Ronda Rousey's record for the most successful title defenses in women's UFC history. She's fought the likes of Carolina last year, Claudia Gadelha, Jessica Penne, Carla Esparza. But how would you rate what Rose brings to the table? Rose is on a one-fight winning streak. It wasn't that long ago that she lost to Carolina. What do you think compared to who Joanna has beat in the past?
I think Rose's biggest asset going into the fight is kind of her unpredictability. Her game has evolved over the years, and she's not the same fighter that she used to be. And in every fight, we've kind of seen new wrinkles. And I thought she looked great against Michelle Waterson. Because, I mean, when I say unpredictability, I think that Joanna's past opponents, we've kind of know they were very, very good at what they did, but we kind of knew what they were going to do, right? Claudia Gadelha, Jessica Andrade, Carolina. We kind of knew what they were going to do. With Rose, she does something different every time. She can pull out a flying armbar. You never know really what to expect from her. I think that's her biggest asset. She's definitely the underdog, though. I think Joanna is obviously a heavy favorite. I mean, but I think that Rose, you just never know. You never know what she's going to bring to the table in any given fight.
I do believe Rose is the first women's fighter in UFC history to get a rematch in a title fight. So she's the first one to get a second crack at the belt. And the mental side of the game has always been her Achilles heel. She's talked about it. Pat Barry has talked about it. Certainly Joanna is trying to tap into that. And today she seemed a little emotional, and you wonder how on this big of a stage, how she reacts. Do you think she can right the wrong of a couple of years ago? She lost to Carla Esparza. She said maybe it was a little too much coming off the show. Does she have what it takes up here to dethrone arguably the greatest of all time?
Just want to correct you there. I think women's strawweight to get a title shot, not because Miesha Tate got a title fight twice in the women's bantamweight.
Yeah, but that was Strikeforce. I said UFC.
Miesha Tate fought Ronda Rousey in the UFC in a title.
Oh, and then she fought again.
She fought against Holly Holm. Yeah. Come on, Ariel.
That's right. Helwani. You know who told me that stat, by the way? Pat Barry. So he was trying to build up his own fighter, and he gave me the wrong information. I took his word for it.
But yeah, I think she definitely has. She is a different fighter than she was when she fought Carla Esparza. She's a different person. If you look at a picture, I mean, it isn't just the hair; it's just her whole demeanor. And I wrote about this week. She has changed. She's evolved. Whereas she was talking about being the next Ronda Rousey. People were talking about her being the next Ronda Rousey. I'm talking about Rose. Dana said it. Even Ronda said it herself. And Rose kind of embraced that, and now she's talking about she wants to change the world. She wants to make the world a better place. She's not really concerned with her own celebrity. She's matured as a person. It's a different fighter now than she was then. I think mentally she has it together.
Yeah, we've seen her essentially since she was a kid. I remember Pat Barry being on the MMA hour, and she was just kind of in the background as a teenager, and now obviously the roles have reversed. All right, so who's your pick in the strawweight title fight?
I have to take Joanna. I have a hard time picking against her at this point, against just about any 115er. I think that it'll go to decision, but I do think Joanna will win. I mean, I think she'll win 4 out of 5 rounds, we'll say.
So you think she wins a decision once again? She hasn't finished an opponent, by the way, since 2015 when she defeated Jessica Penne in Germany. By the way, worth noting, and I don't think it's the biggest deal, but Joanna was the last fighter to weigh in this morning, and it did seem afterwards like she was a little relieved that she hit that 115 mark. At the ceremonial weigh-ins, though, she seemed to be in pretty good shape, so I don't think it's the biggest deal, but certainly worth noting. Now, let's talk about Cody Gar Brand versus Tj Dillashaw.
Yes.
This is a promoter's dream. Two young fighters, two great fighters, two fighters in their prime, teammate versus ex-teammate. No love lost. The insults have gone way below the belt at times. Steroid accusations of improper training. I mean, we've had it all with these two over the past year.
Yep.
This one's a lot of fun. In the battle of, the buildup, the mental warfare, the war of words, in your opinion, who's gotten the better of who?
Man, it's so hard to say. I mean, I feel like, I guess Gar Brand has, but I don't really know. There's been so much that's happened. The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I feel this is a fight that should have happened already. Like, it's crazy that we're still doing this with these two guys. I think they're sick of talking about one another. I'm looking forward to seeing that fight, obviously, at the end of all this. But it's hard to say who's gotten the better of the trash talk. I think that both would admit they're not the greatest trash talkers. I think they would both admit that they're not, a Conor McGregor or a Michael Bisping. But they're coming from a genuine place. This is not an act for them. This is organic. It's a real thing. TJ was at Team Alpha Male. He left under bad terms. He says he got thrown out, essentially, whereas Alpha Male says he left and he's a traitor. And the fans are hissing at him because Conor McGregor said he's a snake in the grass. That whole thing, it's all coming to a head tomorrow, thankfully.
I get the feeling, though, this won't be the only time they fight. Maybe because it's the division that they're in, maybe because this feud is too great, especially if Tj Dillashaw wins. But something tells me these guys are going to do it more than once. Thankfully, we're going to get it on Saturday night. And it also feels to me like in this new era where the UFC is looking for new stars, where they're trying to build up some new faces, that Cody is one of those guys. Yesterday we had a press conference with Body Armor right over there. Yep, Kobe Bryant was there, and Cody Gar Brand was there as well. He's one of the new faces. It seems like they have a lot invested in him winning. Do you get that impression as well?
I do. I think whenever Dana White is asked, like, who's like the next guy, he says Cody Gar Brand. This is a huge, huge fight for him in that sense because not only is it a rivalry fight, also wipe away the rivalry. It's the two best bantamweights in the world, bar none. He wins this fight.
Dominic Cruz may disagree, but fair enough.
Sure. But I think that the rocket gets strapped to Cody's back if he wins this fight.
That's right. And also, by the way, Cody taking this to a whole other level just yesterday, releasing footage of him apparently knocking down Tj Dillashaw, which is somewhat taboo, releasing that kind of stuff. But they've been talking about it, and all of a sudden, the video surfaces. So how about that?
I heard that Paulie Malignaggi wanted the entire unedited footage.
Well, he said it was a push. It wasn't a knockdown, and so now we're still debating that. Yes, it's shades of August all over again. In the end, who wins? Who do you have in this fight?
I'm going to take Gar Brand. I think he finishes the job. I think he wins it in the third by TKO.
He actually finishes him. Could you imagine? And then he's talking about Demetrius Johnson. Do you want to see that next for him? Do you feel like that's the logical next step?
Yeah, I mean, I was very. Most people know that I write a lot about weight cutting, and I was not in love with Dillashaw going down, but I talked to Gar Brand a lot about weight cutting and what he walks around at. He's really not he is a very much a true, if not even a little bit undersized 135, or at least compared to the other guys who cut down to 135. I think he could do it, and I would love to see a marquee matchup in the 125-pound. Because there hasn't been a foil for Demetrius Johnson ever, really, in that we got since Ian McCall, since the draw. I think that would be a phenomenal fight.
You don't want to see them fight at, say, 130. You want to see him go all the way down.
I mean, because it would be for the title. It would be a bigger deal. I mean, I would love to see that fight anywhere, at whatever weight. Right now, screw weight cutting. But I think that as far as a draw, that being the 125-pound title fight would be a bigger deal, or even just going up to 135. I wouldn't hate that either.
Let's talk feelings now. Let's talk about how you feel about the main event. This has been quite the roller coaster to get to this point. I mean, it was over a year ago that George said he wanted to come back and he wanted to fight Bisping, and everyone thought it was a ridiculous idea. Why are you fighting Michael Bisping? And Bisping then fights Dan Henderson, and then he takes a break, and then he campaigns for the fight. I mean, if you think about the actual stops and starts that this fight has experienced, it's amazing. Dana White saying George isn't coming back, then he's coming back, then he's going to fight him, then they do the press conference. The ship has sailed. I mean, just as recently as July at the press conference prior to 214, no, Tyron Woodley's fighting GSP next if he wants to fight again. Then Woodley according to Dana, craps the bed, and then he gets the fight taken away from him.
Yes.
So many, ups and downs. It's a very polarizing fight. Even up until this moment, it seems like some fans don't want to accept it. Now that we're here and you've been a part of it, you've seen it all fight week long, how do you feel about this fight? Are you excited? Does it feel like one of the greatest of all time is coming back after 4 years? I mean, this guy is on the Mount Rushmore. If you want to knock John Jones and Anderson Silva for their PED use, like, GSP doesn't have that on his resume.
Yeah.
By default, he may be the greatest of all time, right? Does it feel like that? Does it feel as big of a deal?
I think it's a big deal. Mainly, okay, so the way that I look at this is kind of in a separate way. The fight itself, the matchup itself, is not the best matchup. I think we all know that. That's not like the
stylistically or story-wise.
Like story-wise, there's really no story there, right? There's no real rivalry. Yeah, Bisping is certainly talking it up and that whole thing, but they fought in different divisions their entire careers. It's kind of that's a weird thing.
There's no rivalry between Joanna and Rose. One has developed.
That's true. That's true. But Rose is the number two, the true number one contender, whereas George St Pierre was not. But I'm excited for the fight on individual levels from a GSP, like his own storyline type of thing, coming back after 4 years. He is one of the greatest of all time. He's one of the biggest draws of all time. One of the best personalities, a subdued personality, but one of the best personalities in UFC history. Going up to in a weight class. How is he going to look at 185? He was so dominant at 170. That I'm very interested in. And I'm interested in Michael Bisping also. I think that he gets a lot of heat. He doesn't fight maybe the top contenders in the division, some would say, but he makes the argument that he's never actually turned down a fight. Every fight that he's gotten, it's what the UFC wanted, probably because it's, he's a great foil. He is the best heel in MMA. That's what I really believe so. He has a great knack for being the heel. Probably comes natural to him a little bit, but I'm interested in him and his legacy, and maybe not how it relates to George St Pierre and his legacy. It may not really matter who wins this fight as far as that goes. I think both of them are kind of set, but on an individual level, I'm excited to see how that plays out and where they both go from here.
Whenever I try to think about this fight, try to predict this fight, my head hurts because there are so many questions about both guys, as you just laid out. The layoff for George, the moving up in weight, the size disadvantage that he apparently has. Bisping's eye, Bisping's knee, Bisping's layoff. This is a fight between the two winningest fighters in UFC history, and I feel like that's not being talked about enough. And this is an opportunity for George St Pierre to make history in his own right. And remember back when he was fighting as a welterweight, we were talking about him at 185 for years towards the end, right? So I feel like there's a lot. This one is just like dripping. For whatever reason, and we could talk about it and we can lament it all we want about how they kind of botched the return. We're here now, and I feel like George still has that aura, right? He still has that presence about him. It's good to see him back. I really have no idea what's going to happen in this fight. Like, and I think that Bisping is one of the most underrated fighters as far as he gets credit for being gritty, but his takedown defense, it's hard to rough this guy up.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what's going to happen? I have no idea. I turn to you. What do you expect to see?
Yeah, to add to that, Bisping is gritty. His cardio is one of his best assets. He's fairly durable, but he's also incredibly technical. Like, that's actually one of his technical boxing is excellent. It's fantastic. I think that George St Pierre, what we know about him from history, now he took 4 years off, so what is he now? We really don't know. He's a guy that tries to get the fight to the ground, and he'll be trying to do that against a bigger man, maybe a much bigger man on Saturday night. And how does that go? How does that play out? Someone who has good takedown defense. Does he get him to the ground? And then if it stays on the feet, who has the advantage? There are a number of questions. There really are. And
fascinating.
And at the end of the day, again, 4 years 4 years in MMA is like it's a long time. I mean, the last time that he fought, the entire MMA world was completely different than it is now. It's a whole new universe. So that's a big gap. So I don't know. I feel the same way as you. So many questions.
Wait, so who's your pick? I was turning to you.
I have to give a pick?
Yes, I was turning to you for some guidance here, some clarity.
I'm taking Michael Bisping. I'm taking Bisping. I think that because we just don't know enough about where George St Pierre is, I think that's really the key. And we've seen Bisping. Now, did he look amazing against Dan Henderson? No, but he won the fight. He did enough to win the fight. Did he look great against Anderson Silva in that fight? No, but again, he did enough to win the fight. And I see a very similar thing playing out where maybe Bisping loses a round or two. Maybe he gets a black eye. Maybe he gets busted up. but somehow he finds a way to win 3 rounds against GSP, somehow, some way, and he pulls it off to win again.
So if that's the case and his team continues to reiterate it, this comeback is short-lived. George, if he loses, will walk away. Yeah. So catch him while you can. If you're a George St Pierre fan, this could be one and done for him as far as comeback is concerned. Let's quickly wrap this up and talk about Jorge Masvidal versus Wonderboy Thompson. What a phenomenal fight that is at 170. And I love the new long hair for Masvidal. I mean, it's a little bit more of a, I don't know, is it a more, I don't know, like an older, a wiser, more mature, I don't know what it is. A veteran Masvidal? Maybe. I like it. I don't know what it is about it, but I like it. Anyway, that has nothing to do with the fight. Yeah. Who's your pick?
Masvidal.
Okay. I like because of the hair?
Of course, because of the hair, yeah. I think I like Masvidal a lot in this fight. Very underrated fighter, I think. Just strappy and tough and durable.
Does he figure it out? Because I feel like we've often seen in Masvidal fights, like the fight ends, he doesn't have a mark on his face, and you're like, you didn't do enough to win. Yeah. It's like a classic split decision Masvidal. I feel like he has a ton of those. Can he be aggressive enough to figure out a guy like Wonderboy?
I think so, because I think at welterweight he's a different guy, and I think he goes for it more welterweight. 155, I think maybe he was worried about cardio, trying to make that big weight cut. I think at 170, he's in the right place.
All right, and finally, Johnny Hendricks at 185 against a guy who I feel like is just ripe for success. Like Paulo, and let's be clear here, it used to be Paulo Borrachinha, now it's Paulo the Eraser Costa. It's a complete rebranding here in a city that likes to rebrand things, right? Madison Avenue is just a couple of blocks away from here, and Paulo Costa with those chiseled features, the sunglasses. I mean, this guy, I'm not afraid to say, is one of the most good-looking men that I've ever come across in any walk of life. I mean, he's got it. He's got the physique. He's got the finishes. This could be a future star in the making. 100%. He's like 1996 version of Vitor Belfort. What do you think of this matchup? Is this classic serve Johnny Hendricks up to Paulo the Eraser? I was going to say Borrachinha, but Paulo the Eraser? Or do you think that Hendricks still got it at 185? With a new team, by the way, Jackson Wink.
Indeed. I do think that the UFC lately has kind of put these kind of matchups together, the hot young prospect against the aging veteran who may be on the downside. I think that is what they're going for here. I would never count out Johnny Hendricks, former champion, but I think this is kind of teed up a little bit for the Eraser, which that guy is something. He's something else. He could be. Brazil needs a big star, right? They need some young, some new blood, some big stars, some champions potentially down the road, and I think he's a guy that is on that trajectory.
With all due respect to the great city of Las Vegas, there's nothing like fight night in New York City. And as I said at the top, we are less than 24 hours away now from the UFC's second show here at the Mecca, the world's most famous arena, the third show overall in the history of this building. As far as MMA is concerned, of course, Bellator ran this building back in June. Thus far, first 2 events, whether it's UFC and Bellator, both have been very memorable. And I have a feeling just on paper with this card, it's shaping up to be one of those nights. It really is. Something for everyone at UFC 217. Can't wait for it. Again, less than 24 hours away. We appreciate you watching our coverage up until this point. Stick around for our usual fight night coverage, and we'll be back after it's all said and done. Will George St Pierre become the middleweight champion? Will Cody Gar Brand successfully defend his title? Will Rose Namajunas knock off Joanna Jędrzejczyk and give her First professional loss? We're about to find out in a matter of hours. Can't wait for it. We'll say goodnight from here in New York City. Thanks so much for watching. For Marc, Esther, Casey, the rest of our crew here in the Big Apple, we'll see you on Saturday night. Enjoy the fights.